Mayor Jacobs?
I'm here.
Mr. Hickey?
Present.
Mr. Shackle?
Here.
Mr. Delius?
Here.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. D?
Here.
Mr. Zupnik?
Present.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Here.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Burnersville News and the Courier News and to all subscribers and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 11, 2019.
Please stand for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We have some minutes to approve from February 14th. If you've had a chance to look at those minutes, can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone?
I'm recused.
Recused? Mhm. Anyone else? I think everybody else was here. Okay. We have also 3 resolutions that we need to approve. Lamington Farm Golf Club. Had a chance to look at that one as well. We need a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Rena?
Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Delius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye. Okay, we have the Wheeler resolution to approve. Do we have a motion on that?
So moved. Second.
I'm sorry, who did the first?
Scott.
Scott.
You can't keep my mouth closed.
And Jeff was
I
second.
second.
Okay. Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Delius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye. And our third resolution is the Christie resolution. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Delius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye. Okay, this is the time of the evening that we ask the public if there's anybody here that would like to speak about anything that's not on the agenda. Okay, seeing no one, we'll move along. We have an ordinance that we're requested to look at. I guess, Mr. Mayor, would you like to talk about the ordinance?
Sure, this is an ordinance to expand the members on the Historic Preservation Commission from 5 to 7. There's just felt that there's been some absences on the Historic Preservation Commission, and also this is a way of putting a little more authority with the Historic Pres and getting more active participation at the Historic Preservation. One of the things, I think that most of us have known that we've been trying to implement is to take a lot of the boards and commissions and create more active board that they can run programming. I know the Historic Pres is actually already in consultation with Bedminster School and with the library about running some programs at the library in conjunction with the school, and really to maintain that activity and the participation that they are going to need additional members to join in on those efforts. And so from the Township Committee, our consideration was to expand the membership to 7 and appoint the appropriate folks.
Sounds good. Anybody have any questions about that?
I just have
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
one comment. Talks about membership on the planning board or zoning board. Shouldn't we say land use board, since we don't have those boards?
Well, we're combined.
Right.
We are a combined board.
I know that.
Yeah, right.
It just seemed odd to me to say that. Why we-
Larry, you have any comment on that, or, I mean,
I'll-
technicality, I guess, but...
I'll defer that to Tom and
To
John
Tom?
Blanco to figure out what the proper term is.
Proper, okay.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, I mean, it would not be a substantial change, I don't think. That's up to John, but it would be correct for Bedminster to say land use board.
mm-hmm.
You don't need to distinguish. So,
And Nick, as always.
As always.
Eagle Eye. He reads that very
All right.
So, on this subject, what we're asked, or tasked to do is to, probably the committee has introduced it, and you're here for what's called a referral report. That means I'd like you to find it that it's not, that it's consistent with the master plan.
Mhm.
And it's certainly inconsistent with the master plan. I'd like to just say it is consistent with the master plan, so if the board would entertain it, there'd be a motion just to confirm that you've reviewed the proposed ordinance 2019-001 and that you find it consistent with the master plan.
Anybody like to make that motion?
I mean,
So we're gonna make that change, with the
With
change.
the change.
With the change.
With the change, okay.
Stipulation.
Uh-huh, okay.
That
You
on
want a
the
second? Okay. So we need a roll call?
Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Strickhoff?
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. Deep?
Aye.
Mr. Zepnick?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall.
Aye.
And Trina, if you'll just get word over to John.
I'll send Judy and John a
Yep, great.
All right, I think we're ready for our hearing. Country Club 305 LLC.
Good evening. For the record, Tom Alman on behalf of the applicant. And this is an application for preliminary and final major subdivision approval. Property on Country Club Road, Block 62, Lot 10, and Block 69, Lot 4. The two lots comprise approximately 108 acres in size. The property is in the R10 zone, 10-acre minimum zoning. The application as submitted conforms in all respects with your ordinance. We're proposing 6 lots, each of which is in excess of 10 acres. Mr. Kennedy, to my right, will be testifying. Before I do that, just a couple of minor comments. We have received reports from Mr. Banish and Mr. Ferrero. In due course, we'll address those. Regarding Mr. Ferrero's report, we noticed there are a lot of comments about stormwater management and drainage and those sorts of things. Our thinking is, rather than go through this tonight, we'll kind of give you an overview of the case and talk about the subdivision, and then adjourn and come back next month. Probably we have to revise some plans to deal with the comments in Mr. Ferrero's report, so at that point, it'd be kind of a shorter list of issues, I think, to deal with in terms
Okay.
of stormwater. So that's sort of our
Okay.
game plan. We also have to go to the DEP. That's not been done yet. Our feeling is we should do this process first in case the plan changes that would affect the application to the DEP. Mr. Kennedy will address the permits that we need and the likelihood of getting those, which we believe is very likely. That's all I've got. Unless you have questions, maybe I'll call Mr. Kennedy and we'll begin.
Nope, go right ahead.
Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and address.
Certainly. Ronald Kennedy, Kennedy, 265 Main Street in Gladstone.
The board will confirm that it recognizes and accepts the qualifications of Mr. Ronald Kennedy as a professional engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Please go ahead.
We have 3 boards. I guess you've already pre-marked those, Mr. Kennedy, is that right?
I did. I can do them each at a time.
Okay. So why don't we start? You've heard my introduction. We would just identify for the board the property in question, where we are in the township, again, existing conditions, then we'll kind of talk about what's being proposed.
Certainly. First of all, with the public here, is that the right place for the board? Should I push it up
Everybody
closer?
okay?
I want everyone to see it.
I think it's okay for us, I think,
Can you have?
and we have copies too. We're okay. Yep, we're good.
Okay. The first exhibit is A1. It's an aerial exhibit with today's date of March 7th, 2019.
And so this depicts current conditions to the best of your knowledge?
Yeah, it's an existing aerial photo, and the yellow outline is the property in question. So I'll just give a quick overview of the neighborhood itself. On the top right is the intersection of 287 and 78. 287 runs up and down, or north-south in this location in Bedminster, and then 78 east and west. The other predominant road features are Burton Mills Road, which is on the left side of the sheet, Country Club Road intersection with Burton Mills Road, right at the 78 crossover, and I'll point down where Country Club Road comes around on the corner of the property and heads down into Bridgewater Township, a lower portion of the sheet. Our road network is Meadow Road, which is adjacent to the property, comes along at the intersection of Country Club Road, and then again makes a couple of turns and heads into Bridgewater Township. The boundary of the Bridgewater Township Bedminster border is Chambers Brook itself. It's in orange, and my pointer is pointing it to a map. That is the boundary between the two municipalities. The lots in question are Lot 62, Lot 10, and Lot 69, Lot 4. Lot 4 is an extremely small lot. It's 1.36 acres. That's up on Country Club Road in the upper right of the sheet. And the large tract is Lot 10, Lot 62, and that's 107 acres. So the combined tract is 108.69 acres. The property itself is all within the R10 zone, and the whole area in Bedminster Township is within the R10 zone. It doesn't change until you get on the other side of Route 287, and this white outline dash is the OR zone, section 4-2 zone now. That is on the other side of Route 287 to 202, 206. When you go south into Bridgewater Township, the majority of that property is zoned in the R40 zone, which is approximately a 1 acre single-family residential zone. And you can see some of the historic development in those 1 acre lots that are to the south on that sheet. The property itself, as you see with this outline, is generally agricultural fields that are in the front of the property. There is an old house that was on Bedminster's plan, the historic plan of a 1800s house that's located right on Country Club Road. Small garage behind it. Used to be a large barn that was up for 25 years in quite disrepair. It was taken down about 4 or 5 years ago. The rear of the property has what you see in that darker color is successional growth, primarily cedars that are in that rear of the property. It was farm fields. When we looked at the historic aerials some 20 to 30 years ago, it was active agricultural, and it has stopped. The hardwoods are generally along a stream corridor. I'll show another exhibit where the center of the property that generally goes up and down the sheet or south to north. And there's some hardwoods along those wetlands and floodplain corridor. And then there's 2 pockets of hardwoods that are in the rear of the property, or the most west on the property, that I'm pointing to here, up in the northwest corner and the southwest corner, primarily a hardwood area. But the rest of it was fields, and then have a series of successional growth that's occurred over the years when that stopped farming. I'm going to refer to A2. Same general image blown up a little farther into the site, and it is entitled in the Environmental Constraints Exhibit A2 with today's date. And again, I want to point out the elements on the property that have the various environmental constraints. The first that's in purple is a stream corridor that is in the center of the property itself. And that stream corridor is an unnamed tributary that goes eventually into the Chambers Brook, which comes down in the lower left off the property, actually into Bridgewater Township, right, meets up with Chambers Brook. That corridor itself in the purple is showing the municipality's 50-foot conservation on each side of the stream corridor. So that's a proposed conservation easement that we would have for any approval of a subdivision of the property. Associated with that general area, it shows slightly different color, but is a series of wetlands and then the wetlands transition areas areas, and I'm going to say generally in the same area. And on the bottom portion, of the southern portion of this corridor, there is a small floodplain area that's outlined in red. So again, it's all in the same areas, but as you hear these applications, floodplain's a little different than wetlands, a little different than riparian corridors, all generally in the same areas and has those various layers that are on this exhibit.
When you say, can I interrupt you for a second? When you say stream, does that mean there's always water there?
No.
So
If I go out
sometimes-
there in the middle of August, that effort reaches, it'll be dry.
Okay.
There won't be anything. That's it. The top of the watershed itself is in just off-site, where my pointer is now, maybe another 100, 200 feet off the site itself. So it's the top of the watershed, so drier months of the year, it wouldn't have water. You'll also see an area that's expanded outside of what is in that purple, that is the wetlands themselves, or the floodplain, or the wetlands transition areas that are there. There's also wetlands and transition areas to the rear of the property in the west in those wooded areas. Probably why the farmer didn't cut the trees down to farm it, because it was all wet. But that's conjecture. But that's those rear wooded areas are generally in an area that is wooded, hardwood, and wasn't cleared. And along the front, behind the farmhouse, there's a small little wetland swale that's located there. And then in the front along Country Club Road, there's 2 pockets of wetlands and transition areas associated with it. And the stream corridor that nips just the corner of the property, all the way in the northeast corner, that stream corridor also has a floodplain associated with it. And there'll be a small conservation easement to that, Mr. Chair. Associated with it. The main Chambers Brook is actually off-site and doesn't come onto this property at all. And that has a larger floodplain, that has a much larger drainage area that goes a few miles into Bridgewater Township, parallel to Washington Valley, goes into Sunset Lake area, and goes that Bridgewater Township, and gets into the center of Lawrenceville, into Washington Valley. So it has a pretty large drainage area associated with it, and a real floodplain, and streams running all the time. These others are quite intermittent.
Okay, thank you.
2 slopes, there is on the main portion of the property, there are none. There's one small area that's defined in your ordinance, steep slopes along the small stream corridor up in the northeast. There's no disturbance that are being proposed. The wetland letter of interpretation was issued back in 2013. It has expired. We're applying for a new one. It'll be just basically a reissuance of the old wetlands approval. Likewise, the flood hazard area determination was applied for some time ago. That one, we actually do have a new flood hazard area that was approved in 2018. And we don't need a new one. That'll be good for another 5 years. So as part of any approval, we would still have to get the wetlands letter of interpretation extended to make it current, but we're proposing the same lines that are there today with the wetlands. Okay, the next exhibit is the proposed improvements. So based on the environmental constraints, topography, the configuration of the property, relationships to the public road network, what's being proposed here is a conforming subdivision of 6 single-family residential lots on the 108 acres. We had performed calculations for the environmental constraints for your constraints ordinance, and it determined that we could get 8.3 lots, I believe it was. We're proposing 6. And we had to show that each of those lots would also conform to the ordinance. So we have varied lot sizes, from the smallest lot being 11.1 acres to the largest lot being 24.9. And the varied lot sizes are generally dependent on how much environmental constraints that are on those lots. So the 11-acre lot has little environmental constraints. a larger lot, you have more because you have the accounting factors for wetlands or floodplains or transition areas. The proposed improvement to the property would be one private roadway that would be designed off of Country Club Road between the Meadow Road intersection, and I would say the first turn or the turn as you head towards Country Club. And what's being proposed there is similar to other private roads that we designed in Bedminster Township. It would be an 18-foot wide rural lane according to the residential site improvements. The roadway itself would be 18-foot wide, and then would have 2-foot grade shoulders on both sides to be consistent with the residential site improvements. No curb would be on there, no sidewalk, none of those other suburban design standards would be employed for this. It would be an 18-foot road. The only thing that looks suburban in the sense is the end of the roadway. We have a cul-de-sac to comply with the residential site improvement standards that would have a 40-foot radius, so it would be 8 foot from one side to the curb, but an 80-foot radius at the end. Now that driveway or private road is designed as 1,550 foot long from Country Club Road to the rear. And what the design intent is to follow the existing contours along the path, not a lot of change in vertical elevation. The only area that we would have is a crossing that would be along this wetland or stream corridor in the center of the site that my pointer is right now. There would be a crossing there of a box culvert, and I think the initial calculations we have would be about 10 foot wide and maybe 4 foot high, the path underneath it, in order to pass the appropriate storms. Can't be all the way culvert all the way around. It has to be a natural volume according to DEP regulations. So it would be a 3-sided culvert that we would have at that one crossing. We chose an area that had an existing opening already, that farm equipment or the maintenance of the property, they drove through there, so we took an existing opening to limit any tree removal that would be in that area and took a path that would be in the center of the property. And again, it would be the cul-de-sac in the rear. So generally on the Country Club side of the stream corridor, we would have 4 house sites that would be in the front. And then in the rear, from the stream corridor to the west, there would be 2 house sites. They're the larger lots, the 24-acre and a 23-acre lot that would be in the rear. And lots are shown to have driveways to the private road itself, except for the lot all the way in the front that my pointer is now on Country Club Road, that would have direct access to Country Club Road, that driveway. So the intent to go by this when it's constructed, that you'd see a relatively small driveway opening or a large driveway, estate opening, as opposed to a suburban driveway intersection that you see in the neighborhoods as you got a little farther south into Brookfield Township, which primarily wants to still conform to the standards by your town and by the residential site improvement standards, but downplay that full entry and make it look like an estate road.
Will that be a paved road or dirt road? Or?
We're designing it to be paved for various reasons, but in this approval, we talk about the option possibly to put it stone. The challenge for anything is the buyers, do they want paved or stone? And again, we've had debates in this town about some of your stone roadways are challenged to maintain and those aspects that make it there, but we're approving it and designing it as a paved roadway.
Okay, with
So the stormwater management, all those features, it's designed.
without curbing?
Without curbing. Yeah, it
And what would be on this, you said 2-foot side?
Well, it's, the residential site improvement standards requires these graded shoulders at the end, so it just doesn't drop right. And again, we're in a pretty flat area there. We were sheet flowing it for stormwater considerations. Mr. Farrar was recommended that we actually crown the road, and we have to modify some of the stormwater elements of those things, so that's why we'll meet with him and go through those details of those things and come back with a revision to the plan. So that's a nuance as far as crown road as opposed to the road that you put across.
And what happens at the end of the cul-de-sac?
It's a large turnaround, basically. It's a cul-de-sac that you see in the suburban. And it would be be a 40-foot radius, so you can flex from the lots of vehicles. And mostly for the garbage trucks, the fire trucks, those and turnaround. And the road itself would be a private road, it wouldn't be a public road, so the maintenance responsibility would be owned by those residents that live on the road. There'd be a homeowners association for the road maintenance as well as any of the common detention basin elements. And we'll talk a little about that, the common detention basin elements that live there.
Ron, there was some discussion about the cul-de-sac, and I didn't quite understand the issues. It was too long to have a cul-de-sac or something?
So a couple of
Could you
things.
address
with
that?
Yeah, I can. The Bedminster had a standard that's been in your ordinance for a long time that had the maximum length of a cul-de-sac being X, and it was 450 feet, something of that nature. The residential site improvement standards came in some time ago and tried to standardize all these regulations throughout the state. And they took a different approach, and many municipalities have their traditional zoning standards based on the length. And we're going to take a different approach than that. We're going to base the length on the density of population that you have there. So,
Cars go.
yeah, and they based it on, again, in a single-family house, it's 10.1 trips per house or per lot per day. And in that formula, there'd only be 6, and actually in this case, there's only 5 that go down there. So there's not a limit to the length of cul-de-sac because of the low volume that's on it. Now, if it was a condominium, then it would say, okay, you have X number of houses, condominiums, if it's a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom, and there's a whole scale that you would have, that you can only have a maximum of 300 foot before it's a dead end in this area. So they used it, the rational nexus was, it was based on density. So in this case, and again, it would have to be a determination of this board if we need a design waiver for that, but the residential site improvement standards say we comply with the 1550. You have an ordinance that still has if it still has jurisdiction, that's a question, if it still has jurisdiction because the residential site improvement standards don't override that, then we have to ask for a design waiver of that.
But just confirm for the record that Frank and Paul and I have conferred with one another, and our joint opinion is that RSIS does control, and so there's no ordinance standard that's applicable for the length of the cul-de-sac. That's true throughout New Jersey. The standard is 250 average daily trips for a cul-de-sac for single-family residential, and this is well under that. This is in the 60.6, I guess, range. Or even, so the length is not an issue, and but RSIS standards apply.
Design waiver not
No,
required.
Not required, because the ordinance technically doesn't even apply.
Okay, thank you.
So the design plans that we submitted to you are focused on I'll call it the public improvements, but the improvements that are common, which would be the detailed design of the roadway itself and the detailed design of the common stormwater improvements that would be here. We also show a whole series of landscaping or shade trees, or trees, because there's some evergreens in there, along the roadway itself. Those are elements that are common. The individual lots, we showed a conceptual house, a conceptual driveway, turnaround areas, a living space outside, and then conceptually, we showed stormwater management associated with each one of these houses. As you may have seen in the traditional Bedminster type of development, this isn't one that you're going to build the road and the next week all 6 houses are going to go up. This is going to take quite a bit of time to build these there. So we're not designing it one, like a multi-family project where you're building everything at one time. That it would be a very slow type of build. And some of the other history out in this area is some end they buy 2 lots and put an equestrian facility as part of the get rid of the lot line. There's all different options that be there. So the focus that we're really trying on from a design perspective is the roadway. The improvements along the roadway are next to it with the landscaping, and then the common stormwater management elements there. Each homeowner would come back at a subsequent time and either design their lot development plan totally consistent to your standards, which means then the township engineer would review it and you wouldn't. Or if they need any exceptions, design waivers, variances, they'd have to come back to this board to go and do that. But as you can see with the size of lots, we've got very large setbacks that are there. We're not going to be hitting the minimum lot coverage criteria for the most part unless someone really says, I want to do, an equestrian facility on a 10 or 11 acre lot, I want to put an indoor arena. Now you're going to start getting near that 5% lot coverage criteria. But that's up to them. That's not what we're asking for now. What we're asking for now is the subdivision of the 6 lots and the improvements being the roadway and the improvements along that roadway and the drainage improvement.
All of which will be maintained by these homeowners, not by the township.
That's correct. And in that vein, the typical impacts are, we're mostly in open fields. The only exception would be in the driveway crossing itself, or the road crossing, private road crossing. We picked an existing path. The way we looked at where that opening was, there's not large trees there, so we may not even have any really significant tree removal. But that will be documented at the time we get the DEP permits. We finalize the plans with Mr. Ferraro. And if there is a couple of tree clearings along that, we have a pretty extensive tree planting program, so we would meet your replacement ordinance, and we don't have any problem in meeting any of that criteria. We have to remove trees. We have 140 trees that have been proposed there, so it's pretty extensive. And the goal is to really make a nice, a country look along this driveway or a private road, and get some landscape and stuff pretty mature in there, so it looks natural and clear into the landscape. Utilities themselves, obviously in this area there's no public water system, so individual wells. We did a shear soil testing out there for the septic systems. We went in the last quarter of last year and got approval from the Board of Health before we even made this application for those 6 lots. So primary and reserve areas were approved for each one of those lots by the Board of Health. Electric would be bought in, cable, all those typical things. And again, with any new development, it would all have to be underground. You may notice actually on one of the plans that we have a long utility easement along Country Club Road next to the right-of-way. And when Matt was looking at the design, the electric poles don't go down in front of you. So actually, in order to get service out to this last lot, that they have to bring it underground, and they wouldn't put it in the town right-of-way. So we put an easement across the side of the right-of-way. It's actually on this lot that there's a 10-foot right easement that we have there for the electric for that house. Rather than running new poles down that road, you can do it and not put it in the road right-of-way because it's private, it's not a public system, and they can put it in there. So that's something that's put in the plan. We're proposing no sight lighting along the roadway at all. We're at the intersection. We haven't done that in a lot of the subdivisions in Western Bedminster, and I think we continue that. I don't think there's anything at Country Club in Meadow. I know there's at Burnt Mills and Country Club, but I don't think there's any lights in Country Club. Yeah, we're proposing no lighting, that would be your no street lighting. I'll give just a very short overview of the stormwater, just to give you the context, and then we'll go back and
Before you move on beyond site lighting, assuming there's several hydrants along that road, no lighting even to support the hydrant locations?
No, and there's no new water lines being proposed, which would be well.
So there's no telephone poles anyway, there's...
No new telephone poles, and there's nothing along this segment of Country Club Road in telephone poles. So, again, I'm assuming...
There's no requirement to mark a hydrant locations with some kind of lighting?
There won't be any hydrants there.
There aren't any there.
There wouldn't be any
There won't
hydrant?
be any hydrants.
There's no public water.
There won't be public water.
So they got to put out their own fires?
So what typically happens with that is when you start getting to the larger estate houses, is you typically put in either a pool or a cistern at each one of those structures. When you start, at this density, when you start talking about communal types of cisterns, you will not qualify for the credits from the insurance company because they're physically too far away. You have to be within a certain distance of that water source to the house, and driveways are longer than that criteria. So what we typically see with this, and we've been doing it not just in Bedminster, but all the properties around here that are not hydrant, that are large lots, estate lots, is it's up to that homeowner to put in that system generally required by the insurance company that's going to have the insurance on it.
Okay, sorry. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's, I mean, again, we've been looking at these types of things for years and years and years, even
Private
about 20 years ago, 10 years ago, about putting cistern ordinances in place. And that works good when the density is much higher than this in non-hydrant areas. But when you start getting to this low a density, no one gets credit. It's there, it's too far away, but you need that water source closer to actually where that fire event would actually be occurring.
It's interesting, then, a swimming pool solves it.
It does if you put a hydrant to it. Okay, most fire trucks can get around the back of the house to get to a swimming pool, but a lot of these swimming pools that are designed will go and put a pipe to it and then a hydrant in a convenient location.
Pretty ingenious, really.
Right out of the hydrant, so you go to the hydrant, and in some cases, we're 300 foot away from the pool, but we can still draft the water out of that hydrant from the pool to get water for that fire.
Just for the record, Mr. Kennedy's a firefighter.
Yeah, right. We trust him.
It's one of his many specialties.
And I believe the chief is sitting right behind, right behind Ron. But, you know, just sticking on the firefighting issue, does this stress the fire department from equipment standpoint?
Not from, there's nothing unique about this than any other area in western Bedminster. The biggest thing that we face these days are too narrow driveways to get access to the houses. And that becomes our biggest challenge these days. Not necessarily water, we carry water, all the other towns have tankers that carry water, you can go out and bring water out there. The biggest problem, again, it's not even Bedminster, it's also the other surrounding municipalities, is physically getting to it. And these vehicles that we have, that everyone has to be seated, can't hang off the back, can't hang off the side, they have seat belts on. These trucks don't get smaller, they get bigger. Now we gotta drive that down the residential driveway. Years ago, most of these were farm houses, so they were driving the farm equipment down there, so the roads were wide, driveways were wide. Now everyone drives a little SUV up and down that driveway, and now we bring a big fire truck in, and we get a lot of streaks on the side of this from rubbing branch going down some of these driveways. That's typically the biggest thing. Now, volume-wise, obviously the more houses in the community, the more increase that it could be there. But 6 over X, I mean, is not a tremendous increase that we're talking about. But the number of occurrences as population or number of units increases, then you just have frequency issues. That you're going out more for those things.
We'll just touch on stormwater a little bit, just to...
Yeah, I just want to give just a quick overview. So our intent with stormwater is the common road itself would have stormwater associated with the property. That we would have the water quality, peak rate of runoff attenuation, and infiltration would be along there. What we do have a little unique on this, that we'll go through the details with Mr. Ferraro, in the rear of the property, off the cul-de-sac, we have 2 basins that will be the infiltration basins for the entire parcel. That would also include any disturbance that was done on each one of these lots. And the primary reason is this is where we found areas in the rear of the property that were suitable for infiltration. And we found less areas in some of these front lots that were suitable for infiltration. So we can build bioretention basins in the front, we can build detention basins, but we can't infiltrate. So what we did was we maxed out what someone could build on each one of these lots according to your ordinance, and made sure that those infiltration basins in the rear can accommodate full build-out. So there's never a question later, and that's what we have to confirm, with a lot of calculations with that, confirm with Mr. Ferraro. So it doesn't put the town at a burden that someone's overdeveloping and you didn't take into account that additional infiltration. And then on each individual lot, we show what would be required generically for the house that we show on the plan, and the driveway, and those other improvements around the house. And then each homeowner, as they went to build a house, would come in and have to do their own stormwater management for water quality and the peak reduction factors, but wouldn't have to do infiltration, because we could build out that right now in front of the whole site.
Okay.
But with that premise, it's a lot of details, and we have to go and spend some time with Mr. Faro going through this review. As far as the zoning, each of the lots, as I stated before, comply with bulk standards. The density, we're showing large houses on here, and you know it's clearly on a small lot being 11 acres. We can show a house that complies. That's pretty significant, even better than with the lot coverage. We did the resource conservation areas on each one of those lots and submitted that for review. The property itself would have stream corridor conservation easements that I showed in that one exhibit that had purple. There would be site triangle easements at the intersections, not only of this new driveway, or excuse me, private road, but we'd also include site triangle easements that don't exist now at the intersection of Country Club and Meadow, so that proper site distance. There'd also be...
Ron, can you just go back to the conservation easements? There was one on that corner property.
So in purple, it would be these fingers in here, this finger, and there'll be a small finger up here.
And that's off the width of the stream channel?
Yeah, so it takes the stream channel and goes 50 foot on both sides. So right in the center here, it actually splits the stream corridor so that it's wider. So it's 50 foot on this side, 50 foot on that side, and you got this 100 foot wide island, so to speak, in the center that'll be part of the conservation zone as well. So generally it's 50 foot if the stream's narrow. In this case, it's split, so it has to be wider.
Where does your road cross that on that drawing?
Approximately right here.
Okay.
And those are obviously subject to whatever the DEP comes up with as far as the permitting for the crossing of the stream. They may require additional easements that will be on top of what...
Right, so those are additive,
Yes.
not narrowing the conservation easement. And
Correct.
Tom, what's the restrictions that our conservation easement puts on that land?
Paul would know more detail, but I think it's no disturbance, no structures, no changing of the grade.
Except for what the DEP requires for the crossing. Apart from that, that's what he's got.
Right, okay.
So the other third-party approvals, as I stated, we've already had Board of Health approval. We actually appeared before the Environmental Commission last night. We would still have to get Somerset County Planning Board approval, the Soil Erosion Conservation District from Somerset Union, and the DEP wetlands would only be for that crossing, and it would need a wetlands general permit, and then the flood hazard area permit. It would be an individual permit, but a flood hazard area permit to cross that one crossing, and that's the only additional permitting that would be required.
Question about the lines you've drawn? And if this question should be deferred, just let me know. But Lot 4 isn't significantly burdened by your constraints as opposed to the other lots? It seems like your wetlands, your floodplains, your constraints as outlined on the one plan are fully focused on Lot 4. And then you have the Oklahoma Panhandle up there, Lot 6. And I'm sure you've been pushing lines around on paper for weeks or months, but I'm curious as to the configuration you came up with.
Sure. A couple of things. When you start getting to large lines, you can't see lines when you drive down the road afterwards, as far as where people's property line is. It's not like, I'll say, Staten Island, high density, or, high school, or anything like that. some of these
You're
lots...
talking to a city kid, obviously, so
Okay, good.
learn me.
In what the relationship on some of these is truly by the constraints on a piece of property. So we have a whole set of rules at the state level and at the town level of what can and cannot fit with certain criteria. So I just can't typically take a configuration of property and with the different layers of regulations and make rectangles or squares. Hard to do. I can do that if we have sewers, no environmental constraints, and it's, you know, a pretty straightforward type of piece of land. But when you start dealing with properties anywhere out in Western Bedminster that have the typical constraints that you would see on a property like this, have soils that have good areas that you can do a septic system, and other areas that we tested that just simply don't comply for a septic system. So in this case on,
6 is the
one
pan.
of six,
Is the
one of
pan.
six in there is that the septic itself is back here. That's why you see Oklahoma.
Okay.
So the septic is in this location, and then the house is over here, facing that location.
All right, I thought that might be the case with Oklahoma, but
So that's
go
where...
go back to 4 though for a second.
It's the same thing there. The septic, in this case, it's a little closer, but we have a calculation that your ordinance comes up with that says you basically have to net out 10 good acres of land. Okay, so you have to have 10 acres, I say generally, unencumbered by constraints. So the configuration on that lot is based on areas, well, I gotta put the constrained area on one lot or the other, but I gotta go back to that matrix that you have, and you have different assignment values for each type of constraint to say you have to either increase or, not decrease, increase the lot size because a factor of 0.5 or a factor of 0.75 to these constraints to say that I can't just have a 10-acre lot, it has to be bigger. And in this case, I think it's 17 acres because you have those additional constraints.
Okay.
So that's where, and then we have to tie that to the septic as well for those elements. So, you know, the constrained areas need to go somewhere, okay, on a lot. So we look at that and the quality of each one of those lots, and is there an area around each one of them that has an estate quality, you know, sound.
So in any of your planning, any lot that is particularly constrained would have to be that much larger to accommodate those constraints?
Absolutely. You
Okay.
know, and in some lots, not even here, in other parts of Bedminster, we had to have 30, 40 acre lots because of the constraints that are on lots, whether it was floodplain or slope, not slopes, not less, but floodplain and wetlands, that you have to make lots a lot larger because of that. And that's your ordinance that you put in place for quite some time. So that was your control to say, what do we do with those constrained pieces of land? And if you didn't have that in place, I can put I could put a 10-acre lot there and have a half acre that's only usable for that home. Okay, you decided that's unreasonable. You
It'd be a
need to
much,
have a bigger area.
be a much denser project
Yeah.
if you didn't have those constraints in the
So
ordinance.
that's why you have it. And again, that's why you get, I'll say, not conventional box lot lines with all those different factors that are in it. And if you look at your tax map up and down other areas of Lamington, Black River Road, Long Lane, you'll start seeing patterns of that why is that lot line all over the place? And a lot of that is based on the combination of soils and your resource constraints ordinance that you have in your town.
Okay, thank you.
All right, on the review letter, besides the stormwater, footprint for Ferraros, I talked about the...
This is dated February 28th, just for the record.
Yeah, it's only the point, wetlands.
Yes, right.
I talked about the wetlands and the flood hazard areas. We have the flood hazard, the wetlands needs to be updated. We are requesting the driveway to be paved, the private roadway to be paved. On item 4, I asked about the responsible party for the stormwater. Again, those improvements that will be defined as common improvements would be by the homeowners association. Ones on an individual lot that would only deal with that individual lot would then be the responsibility of the homeowner. not the association by itself.
So it'll be 5 in the association, is
Yeah.
what you're saying?
That's correct.
So the outlier on Country Club Road would not be part of that association?
Yeah,
I don't see a need for that. I mean, I guess we'll give that some thought, but I don't see a need to put that lot into this.
yeah, on the roadway, no, it's just a question of on the stormwater.
Yeah,
Can I get
we
that
need to look at
statement by
that.
itself?
And it's your call.
Yeah.
We talked about the residential site improvement standards.
Ron, while you're still on that, will the infiltration basins be under the responsibility of the homeowner association as a common part?
They need to be. Yeah, our pretense wasn't that we think they need to be common because it's all, everyone's sharing in that obligation.
And then are there any basins that are, say, stormwater management basins that are solely for the road? Or have to be built with the road?
Yes.
And could you just show me where
I
those
can,
are?
certainly. So there would be one along here, one along here, and one back there. So
So they're close to the road?
They are, they hug the road, the 3.
Okay.
There's a 4th basin off the cul-de-sac that's both an infiltration and the road. So really it's a 4th that's right here. So you got 1, 2, 3 small along the road, one that's larger because it's infiltration, and then a larger infiltration.
And I assume you'll have an easement to the homeowner association for access to
Yeah, we have to have
maintain
that.
all those.
Exactly.
Thank you.
We talked about the RSIS versus your cul-de-sac lane. The other items are just clarifications that we agreed to on here.
You can probably hold off on the stormwater comments for
Yeah,
now.
makes sense. We agree on crowning the road. Yeah, everything else is just in those.
You don't see any major problems. It's just a matter of kind of going through the details and working out plan revisions to accommodate this.
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Banish's, the only thing I think he had a comment on is on 3.1. This is a date of February 28, 2019. He talked about the house and how it's discussed in your preservation plan, your historic preservation plan. So the current condition of that house is poor. The holes in the roof.
You're being somewhat kind, but
No, that it's been broken into many times. There's graffiti on the side of it. When some windows broken, they've been patched up. There's holes in the floor, as I said. It's not in great shape, and it would be extremely difficult to do that and rework that. So there's some suggestions that it maybe could be restored, used as an accessory dwelling unit. It could be in the front yard setback of that one lot. Our initial thoughts on this is that it was beyond repair from the standpoint of restoring that, and that the homeowner likely wouldn't see that as a feature that they would embrace on more of a liability type of thing, and that's what we're proposing, not to keep it on the plan. And there was some suggestions, if it was not going to be kept, that you would document it with photos and pass those along to the appropriate groups, whether it's the Historic Commission or the library, and we certainly agree to do that. But our intent is not, we looked at it, it's pretty clear. The other items are more comments that I've generally touched on already. Some clarifications that I'll take care of in the plans, and things other comments.
any other questions from the board?
I actually have a few questions. We'll be hearing from a planner. Do you have a planner coming? to speak?
There's no variance relief, so no planner is being proposed.
Okay, fine. So if we approve all this, we have to, it's more or less permanent. So the question I have is, since it appears to be that the state property values have dropped significantly in our area over the last several years, have you done any market research on the ability to build and sell these lots after the approval might be for the subdivision?
Yeah, the property owner has, and, you know, again, we agree with that it's not the strongest of markets, but with a property like this, it's a slow process. not one that you would typically see with the owner of the property is in for a longer term play at this, so to speak. This is not something that you're going to go put and sell these things out tomorrow. It's not going to absorb itself into the market. We see that with a lot of things, not only in Bedminster, but in other communities. So it's design it right, design it long lasting, and it's going to be a while before you see a lot on there, or actually 6 houses on there. It'll be quite some time before that happens.
The question I have is that it could end up being where everything's approved and maybe one lot is sold for one house. So at that point, I guess the road would have to be finished. All these improvements would have to be done for the one lot, and then it could take years even for the other 4 or 5 lots to be finished.
Absolutely.
So I'm just trying to project into the future, because once we make a decision, it's always a permanent decision.
So to that end, I think I had this comment last night at the Environmental Commission, is I thought of 3 subdivisions quickly that we've been involved with for the last 25 or 30 years out here. One was a 6-7 lot subdivision, Emmett Smith Farm on Limington Road. The road was put in, it was longer than this, probably about 2,500 foot of 7-lot subdivision. The map was filed, and one landowner bought it and built nothing. Okay, and they put a road in that was 2,500, maybe even longer. It was a long drive, longer than this. Other properties along Black River, we did a large subdivision of 700-800 acres and a series of common driveways that were done in Norfolk there. And I think there was 14 lots, maybe 15 lots, and in 20 years now, only 4 houses have been built. So that's, it's a common, thing that we would see. Another one off of McMurtry Farms on Pottersville Road, that was a 7-lot subdivision that was done. One house was built in the back for the landowner, and he wanted and still has those other lots preserved. He built the long driveway longer than this, and it's generationally, his kid wants to go there, his kid doesn't want to go there. It's a long play. These are not something that you traditionally see. Tomorrow you're going to see 6 signs up there, and you're going to see 6 framed houses. You're not talking about that. That's not the way we've seen Bedminster being developed in this light. So I do agree, it's a long play.
Okay. I just wanted to bring that, out.
And I think other properties, though, stood the test of time. They were built, the road on McMurtry Farm was 18 foot. It had 2 or 3 culverts in it, very similar to this, longer than this, and it's used only as an estate driveway, to go back and forth to the one house. And that's all, that one house was built on the back. I think it was 217 acres of land that was built on. So yeah, someone did that and built the one house and preserved the right. They didn't want to give that up. Preserve the right that those other lots still exist, but they still wanted their one house now and wanted to use enjoyment, wanted to live on the property. Right. They didn't want any of the house. But we went originally subdivided into those lots.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else on the board?
Just a quick question. I know there was significant conversation at the Environmental Commission last night about maintenance of the natural buffers to the neighboring properties and the hardwoods. Can you speak to that for a minute?
Certainly. So on the perimeter, there is I'll say the best ones are the north and then the southern lines. There's an old tree row between the adjoining properties. They were all farm fields at one time, and there's no proposed disturbance. What I don't know exactly on that is if the trees that are there, that tree row, are they on those residential properties adjoining it, or are they on this property? I'd have to go out and locate each tree to know that. But there is a tree row along it. No intent to preserve that. If the board feels that they want a little buffer there, then it says that we can't cut those trees down there. We have no problem with that as far as putting there. But
they're all in the setback in any event.
Yeah, they're all in the setback. They can't be removed. But if someone, and it's the typical things that if any of these lots were built, there's not an enticement that if I knock those trees down, I get a 40-mile view. And there, in some settings, there is that you all of a sudden you get to Burnsville Mountain and you cut a couple of trees down and you get a view of Manhattan. You don't have those typical things that would be here. But if the board feels comfortable and putting a strip in there, that would be some form of no tree removal along those strips. I think the applicant's okay with that.
Ron, has there been any view analysis of where your proposed houses are in conjunction with views from Country Club?
We didn't do that type of, the closest house is the one in the northeast corner, but that has a significant amount of vegetation and has floodplain and wetlands that, or stream corridors and wetlands in front of it. So it's not like a owner could go and knock those trees down and the house would feel too close to the road. Right? And that house itself is still, I believe that's 300 to 400 foot off the roadway. The house that's next to it, that's shown an area that's 600 foot off of the roadway. The corner of Meadow and Country Club Road, that's shown about 300 foot off the roadway. So we're showing those back. They can go as close as 200 foot according to your zoning, but we're showing them, back where someone would logically want to put them on the property, a little farther back from the road.
What's at the property right now? Is it being farmed?
The front fields are being farmed by, I believe it's Dott's family has been farming those. And in the back, it's been the cedars that are back there.
And the farming is hay, or is it something?
Hay.
Okay.
A couple years ago, he was doing something else, but I think it's all hay. He may have put a crop in there, but I think it's all hay.
And what are the, do you know the quality of the soils there?
Well, from a farming standpoint, and talking to Stotts, they're still, typical Bedminster soils that are there for the farming. So he'll always say it's best for hay, because you can put sorghum or some other things that are in there, but, it's the typical heavier shale Bedminster soils with a very high clay content that's in there. It works, and he'd say he can still farm it, but his whole farm is actually on the other side in Bridgewater, along Meadow Road, and that's all the same soils that are down here as well, that his whole farm's on, Stotts farm.
So to follow up on Lou's comment that figuring that it may take several years for the houses to get built and sold off, is it the anticipation to keep the lots that are in active agricultural use, that they would remain in agricultural use until such time as construction begins? Or does that get disrupted by the construction of the cul-de-sac?
No, it doesn't, because it won't get disrupted by that. And obviously, there's an incentive to keep that farming activity going.
Pretty big incentive, yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword. I mean, if he doesn't farm it, taxes go up, you get more money.
You don't have to farm it.
So if he farms it, looks better, but you get less taxes. But the general, what we see, I'll say typical, is that farming activity would continue even if one house or two houses were built in there, because there's an incentive.
This large acreage, it can easily be done.
Anyone else on the board?
Madam Chair, I did have one question.
You're next.
You're talking about the locations of the homes. It just struck me that the lot on the corner of Meadow and Country Club really has 3 front yards. And you've got a setback of 200 feet or 1 foot for each 3 feet of width of the home. So I think that's going to, I don't know if you've taken that into consideration with that prototypical layout or not. Because that may, and the reason why I bring it up is because you may want to look at that in a little more detail now in the next meeting, because if it is wise to have, for the board to make a determination on which should be the best front yard, whether or not there should be some variance associated with the subdivision, so that individual lot doesn't come back here again. It may be prudent to deal with that now.
Yeah, we clearly have enough room for the 200-foot standpoint. It's that 3 foot per length of house, which I don't have. I can take that house design and...
Right, and I don't know if that works. If that works, then maybe that's fine.
It still has, I just looked at it quickly, that, in the area of the house itself, from the road, the private road, to Meadow, that's about 650 to 700 feet. Okay, so it has 200, and it has an additional about 250 feet. Just the width of there in that context. But I'll look at it. Maybe I can see how you would define how that measurement would happen.
Right, because the house is 70 feet wide, And that's 210 feet, so then it starts to squeeze, just, I don't know, I think it's worth looking at.
Anything else, Paul?
No.
No?
I just have a
Very
quick
good,
question
yeah.
for Frank. Frank, you heard Ron's comments about the historic structure. You had made, they really seem to address your comments, but I'd like to hear from you whether or not your concerns were addressed.
Usually, in a condition, in a circumstance where a building is in this kind of condition, it takes a motivated restoration interested person to want to buy a building like that and fix it up. In a neighborhood like the one that's about to be created here, buildings like that don't find a lot of that kind of interest. So I appreciate and understand why they're saying that they don't plan on keeping the building. Ron, have you gotten the certificate of appropriateness already for the removal of the building?
We haven't. And I don't know the timing of when we would do that, because the buyer could come along and say, I like that. So, we haven't talked about the timing of when we would.
That's a good point.
So if it's a long period of build out of a property like this, and maybe we keep it up for a little bit, but it's, I should say that, we got issued, I would say, structure notice a couple times even on this building, that we had to go up there and patch up the windows, and put floorboards, get rid of the needles that were hanging out in the hallway. So maybe that's a bad idea.
I have a question for Paul, pursuant to his last question. Paul, if we approve this subdivision, whatever stipulation, and someone came back with a building project for one of the lots, and they came back and were willing to put their house reasonably to the same size as what Ron is describing in his proposed structure, they could do that as of right by just filing for a permit in the
Well,
building?
it literally could be anywhere on the lot that conformed with the ordinance, and you wouldn't see them again.
Right. Now, the next question is, what is the likelihood for an 11 to 20 acre, 20 is the largest one?
24.
24 is the largest one. What is the likelihood for about 11 to 24 acre building project not to come back here?
It's very unlikely that you would see it.
Very likely that we would see them.
That's correct.
Okay, so we need to be fussy here.
There's a lot of room to develop these lots.
Okay?
And when we see it, it'll come back.
That's almost always the case, and so, for example, existing lots in the R10 district, with 10 acres, there are significant zoning restrictions, but they usually have tremendous building envelopes that they can use to build their house. It's the rare case that comes back.
Okay.
And you don't have to be too tough, because the zoning has resulted in these lot sizes, and the setbacks are on the map, but there's generous areas, that do not violate the setbacks where the houses could be changed to or relocated to. So most people don't bother to come in for a variance, they try to avoid it.
Okay.
Frank, anything else that you wanted to bring up, or?
Well, only at this initial stage, I asked a question about whether or not the entry toward the private road was essential, or whether this could be done in some other manner, and I think that's probably more a question of the owner's preference than, in theory, if they left all those driveways to be done by individuals, you would see a new road feature that makes it look a little more suburban, maybe, but you'd have all those other driveways coming out onto some public road someplace, so they wouldn't be the owner's responsibility. The lot buyer would put in the driveway, but you'd get 6 separate driveways, each trying to get out to a public road. I mostly asked the question, had they considered not having that new private road? But I guess you're going to build the road up front, Ron?
Yeah, and again, that's always a classic debate, is we haven't gotten to the detail whether we do some ornamentation up in front with pillars, or to be consistent with the ordinance to make it look like an estate driveway. It just, we're not there yet, and that may be something we'd come back and talk to you about, or I'm not sure if you did that, whether we'd have to come back or not on each individual lot. But the point is we can make that look more like a driveway.
But you
That's
want,
the feature.
but you want to have these houses unified by that road.
Yeah.
You want to create a neighborhood like that.
If you had the individual lots coming all the way out there, out driveways coming all the way, then you got these log flag stems coming out,
Right.
each one of those, each one has to maintain those, and you're literally talking about 2,000, maybe 2,500 foot driveways individually. That's a lot of driveway on that many lots going across there, on generally that size lot. We have 2,500 foot driveways, but they're on 150, 250 acre parcels, not a 10 acre parcel.
Right.
So you have that in there, but the context is, I got a big farm now, I got a big operation, I'm not having the local farmer doing it, I got people on the properties that are doing it. It's a different feel with those long driveways and what we've been talking about.
And
We
we've
have the
had
commonness of the driveway.
Thank you.
The roadway.
We've had some lots like that where they have had these individual staffs and that sort of thing coming down. And unless they are these very large lots, that's where we've run into issues with lot coverage variances. Because they've got so much of their coverage tied up in the driveway, they've ended up with lot coverage variances.
Right. Okay. Larry, did you have something else? you wanted to
Yeah, I was, not to put Tom on the spot, but we've done that before.
Please don't.
Too late. This property has a history with Bedminster, particularly with the R10 zone. And for a very brief synopsis of the litigation where Bedminster preserved the R10 zone on a suit brought by the former property owner.
Sure. Yes, this was the site that is the subject of the Kirby versus Bedminster lawsuit in which the R10 zoning was approved by the Superior Court and the Appellate Division. So it's close to our hearts that this ordinance has now is applied. It's being complied with, and subdivision directly complies with that current ordinance. Yeah.
All right, I think we'll open it up to the public. They have any questions? No?
For this witness.
For this witness, yes.
There was someone standing up in the back.
All right.
Well, I'm sorry, that's
Please identify yourself.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Steve Parker, 130 Airport Road, representing Somerset Air Service, the operator of Somerset Airport, and I'm not making a comment for or against the application. I just want to state for the record that the site is underneath one of the flight paths of our runway, the air traffic pattern for runway 12. It has been like that for 70 years. It will be like that for many more. That doesn't mean anything good or bad for the application. I just want to make sure future homeowners know that in the record that they're near an airport. And I made the same statement about 8 years ago in Branchburg for another subdivision, so that's all.
Could we just clarify, are you asking for like a deed notice to the owners of the properties as a result of the subdivision?
I just wanted in the record that it's near an airport, underneath the flight paths of an airport. That's it.
Fair enough.
Good
I just
statement.
did that.
Long-standing.
Thank you, Mayor Parker.
Okay.
Well, I just didn't respond, so
Yes.
I'm going to address this to the other Tom. Any reaction to Mr. Parker's comments?
No, I suppose our bars will know about that, and they'll decide whether they want to buy or not, based upon that.
All right.
Other homes under the flight path as well, all around, as you probably well know.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing no one. We're not going to do
We
any...
should still open to the public. I think they've done most of their presentation. Next month.
Yes. Oh, we
might
have
be-
another witness? Do we have?
No,
I didn't think so.
I think the plan of attack would be, we expect to modify the plans before the next meeting. I think,
Yes.
just looking at the calendar, probably the second meeting in April would make more sense for us, if that's available. but we'd file revised plans. Ron would come back, talk about those plans. I would
Okay.
expect Mr. Farrow, if he has time, to give us a revised report, and we'll
Sure.
probably go through that in more detail at that time.
And those plans are limited to the construction details? Or how extensive do you anticipate the change of plans?
I mean, intent was not to change the road, the lot lines, any of those things. A couple of things having to do more with the detailed drainage calculations. Paul is recommending we break a crown on the road, so now we got to do something on both sides of the road as opposed to one side, so we'll make some alterations there. So it would be along the road itself and the detention basins and back. We have some modifications there.
All right, so just looking at your sheets, at the sheets you have, I'm just trying to think of which sheets would most likely be subject to change.
The grading utility plans and the detail sheet.
Okay.
Soil
And
erosion.
the preliminary plat, final plat sheet, the easements around the stormwater changes.
Paul, it's something you think the board needs to see? I mean, or is it something you feel comfortable you can deal with as a condition?
I think it's relatively, there's nothing in the stormwater that scares me, as far as that is concerned. I think the only issue that I have that requires some thought, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is, and it relates to the timing of the filing of the final plat, because this is going to be a private road. Under the private road, under the final map filing act, I have to certify that all the improvements are either installed or bonded before the map can be filed and the lots created.
Right.
Under the change a year ago to the municipal land use law, this board cannot require bonding unless the improvements are going to be accepted by the municipality. They're not going to be done in this case. So we cannot require a bond under the municipal land use law.
So if you apply that to lose comments.
Let's wait. I have, no, don't worry. We have discussed this issue with Mr. Malman, and it's an interesting nuance where one law requires the completion of the work, or the map filing act, or the bond. Another law, typical of New Jersey legislative action, doesn't read the other law and doesn't make any sense because you can't record the plat that creates the subdivision without either the bond or the work being done. So Mr. Malman's a smart guy. He talked to his clients. I talked to him, he talked to his clients, and he has a proposed solution that would not mean we were requiring them to bond.
Correct.
But which would tell us why they'd be willing to do it under either way, so.
Correct. I mean, Ms. Farrow's correct. The board can't compel us to bond for the improvements that are not public. However, we can offer the bond. There's nothing that says we can't bond and the town accepts the bond. So our thinking is that if the board approves the application, we'd either take a condition that before the map is filed, signed and filed, we'd either build a road or bond for it to Mr. Farrow's and Mr. Collins' satisfaction.
Now, would that be the road and all the ancillary?
All the
And the drainage
And the
associated
drainage,
with
right.
it.
The so-called common improvements would
Okay.
all be part of the bond, like it was before the bond legislation was changed recently.
And then to rewind to your first question, nothing in, I don't think there are any insurmountable comments in my letter that create any, that make the application tenuous. Let's put it that way. They could all be a condition.
And so I'm satisfied with this proposal, and I personally not seeing any great reason the board has to see this again, but if the applicant wants to come back, they could.
No.
If you want them to come back, they could. We have plenty of time left.
We certainly don't like coming here, but if, we don't feel like we have
Don't
to.
like us?
And typically, many of these things in subdivision are dealt with in compliance by Paul and Frank and me, because there are a lot of details that go into the preliminary plans that get signed by the chair lady, the final plat that gets signed by the township engineer and the clerk, and that will take months, so that may be longer. And so it's up to you. If you've heard the basics of this application, and I don't think you're going to see major changes to it. So.
I do have one more question going
That's
back to Lou's comments and previous comments. Okay, so they build the road, they install the stormwater. The equipment and everything is in place and people are ready to buy lots and build a home. They build one home, nothing gets done there for 10 years after that. Who's on the hook to maintain the stormwater and the road and all that? The one home road?
Property owner.
Well, no, all,
There's 5 or 6 lots. If the developer owns 4 out of those
That was my
lots,
question.
Yeah,
he's got 80%
right.
of the responsibility.
Okay.
that's right.
That would be a concern, but okay. Thank you, Lou.
Well, we'll leave it up to Paul.
That is the way it works.
I think we should leave it up to Paul. You feel comfortable taking it on?
It's
It's part of the job, huh?
it's not complicated stuff.
Okay, all right. Then I think that answers the question.
Why don't we open it, Madam Chairman, to the board, to the public, just in case anybody is
Okay,
concerned
well-
about that fact that we're probably going to act on it tonight.
Okay, we'll open it up once again. If any, you have any questions or comments? Seeing none.
So if the board would entertain it, it's a motion to approve the preliminary and final major subdivision of the application as discussed this evening with the conditions of Frank and Paul's reports and the conditions discussed this evening, including the offer of the alternative of either bonding or completing the road prior to the signing and the recording of the final plat. Normally, this kind of application will also involve a developer's agreement with the Township Committee of the Township of Bedminster, and we will work with Mr. Bellardo and Mr. Malman on that as well.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Okay. Mayor Jacobs?
Thank you for honoring the R10 zone. Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Strackoff?
Aye.
Mr. Delius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. D?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Mr. Travaglini?
Aye.
And Ms. Gutschall?
Aye,
Okay, thank you very much.
congratulations.
Good luck.
And thank
you.
you, it's a beautiful project.
Nice presentation, thank you.
Not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. Just a minute, let them.
I was right behind it.
Trying to get it. Another developer's contribution. You know, you get a little money for the fire plant. You have to do what you said. You know, it's current. He said, you know, we're ready to kick in
120.
a couple $100 grand.
That's what I said, yeah, that's what I worked.
How are you?
And Paul has to approve it. They give you
They give him a bona fide.
And it comes from the worst case scenario. Reports, they call it labor rates.
Dodge report or something.
Yeah, the full scale. Anybody should do it cheaper.
Paul, I see we have this Casper Ferreira application.
Yes.
Did we deem that complete?
No, that literally, I got it today.
Oh, it just came in, okay.
Well, it has to be New
For in
Jersey.
addition to a home and a non-conforming application.
Please.
Credit from a financial institution.
Go ahead, Paul.
It's
But now you can't be forced.
a house in a pre-existing condition on non-conforming lot on Black River
Well, yes,
Road.
yes.
And it's for an addition.
But
Okay.
But the criteria for...
So you just got it and you're going to review it?
it's,
Okay.
basically it has to
Okay.
be approved.
Does the board have any comments that they would like to make?
Oh, yes. So I've got some papers here. The first one is that the state announced, or actually depicted, its proposal to expand Category 1 designation to various water bodies throughout the state, and it includes the North Branch up by Far Hills, so the bridge, the 202 bridge into Far Hills, that little section of the North Branch heading alongside the Far Hills border, probably from the Layton Funeral Home back towards maybe the end of Riverwood, is identified as a proposed Category 1 stream, and also the Lamington River on the west side of Bedminster and some of its tributaries identified as Category 1 water, which comes with a whole lot of buffers and restrictions for activities and construction around that. And maybe not for tonight.
I can give you the thumbnail in...
Oh, I
2.5
get to put
minutes.
someone else on the spot and they're all ready for it.
Public access, maybe?
In 2.5 minutes.
If you gave him a warning by email, you didn't give me a warning. You don't need a warning, Tom.
What the state is proposing is, I think it's 749 miles of streams are going to be reclassified as C1 streams. A C1 stream means it has exceptional fishery qualities or a variety of other things that the state feels it deserves more protection. The impact is that that stream corridor will then have an increased riparian buffer around it from 50 or 150 feet in each direction to 300 feet in each direction.
In each direction.
And that itself is significant, but then every upstream tributary into that will have that same 300-foot buffer.
And who
So
exactly,
who's going to get grandfathered into that?
Nobody.
Nobody.
and who exactly are they protecting?
Future
Is that a
trout.
rhetorical question?
The future trout.
What, that gets stocked, that can't
That you wanna
survive,
catch.
that can't
That you wanna
breathe?
catch.
The irony...
Water's too warm
it
for the
se-
trout
It
to
seems to me,
breathe.
it
They're not
depends on which set of regulations you're looking at from the DEP. Either every stream is impaired, or every stream is has exceptional resource value that needs to be a C1 stream. It's one of the, everything is one or the other.
So, but what are they going to do? The eminent domain are going to take people?
No, that's it.
No, it's not
It
eminent
becomes
domain
becomes a
because-
regulation, and, the question about who's grandfathered, unless you've got unless you got a project that's up before the regs hit,
You're done.
Oh, my.
Wow.
Oh,
It's very significant. I mean, it's come through before, and now it's coming through again. And anybody has to think back to the big red map.
yep, oh boy.
That's,
Yes.
it has resurfaced and is coming back.
So one of the things that I would like to do is I'd like to convene at a future meeting, probably a joint session of the Land Use Board, the Agricultural Advisory Commission, and the Environmental Commission for a perhaps more formalized presentation by Paul on the impacts and have the map, and the map is available on the DP website and proposed rules. And maybe we can do a little bit of outreach to some of the property owners to let them know how this may affect them. Okay, so that's one comment.
Okay. just stay
And the
on
rule
that.
was,
Any more
Harry, the
business?
rule was proposed. Oh, you want to stay on that one?
Just stay on that one for a second. Can you review those two streams that you said in the first sentence? Because now that we understand there's a 300-foot buffer, I want to understand
The
where
impact.
those streams are.
Okay, so the Leighton Funeral Home,
Yes,
that end,
back behind that.
yeah. Because it runs,
Up
the
to the
river
river.
runs right behind it.
So just that little area or the whole river?
No, it's, as Paul said, it includes upstream tributaries.
It's every stream in town.
Yeah. anything that-
Everything in this town drains
But if
into
you
the
actually look at
C1
the map,
stream.
they only highlighted that little section of
Because the rest is already C1.
coming down, downstream of it. I don't think
How
that,
about behind us here, Paul?
I don't think
That's
this
the
is,
north-
I don't think this is C1 over
That's
here.
the north branch of the
I
river.
know on the western side of town,
Okay.
basically everything
Well,
becomes
yeah,
C1.
that's
On
the
the west side.
Lamington runs.
On the
into
west side?
South branch out
Is
there,
that
but
along
north branch
Black
here.
River Road?
Yeah,
There's all homes along Black River Road.
yes. Yes.
I might even be 300 feet from the river.
You are probably not.
But you're-
There are homes in Potter,
You have neighbors who might be, and which means that if they're going to do anything back there,
Do it now, forever.
yeah.
no, there are homes,
From the high water.
there are homes in Pottersville across the street from where the river is that are going to be in the 300-foot buffer.
Yeah, so what happened?
From top of bank, right?
It's 300 feet from the top
Top
of
of
the
bank.
bank. Even
Top
if
of
your
bank this
property
way,
drains
top
away
of
from the
bank
stream.
that way.
So what, I mean.
But an existing home, doesn't an existing home
Get
get,
in this right there.
there's permits for existing homes, I think.
Well, there's permits to some extent, but effectively, they're regulating any vegetation removal in that riparian zone. And there are
Get a permit
dozens
to
of
cut grass.
exceptions, there are...
There's exceptions, continued maintenance of existing lawns.
Farming that's been existing,
Right, right.
redevelopment, but there aren't.
But
too many.
you can't convert a hayfield to a lawn.
Right.
So what is this law called? I want to look at it a little closer. What is it?
See,
Well, the proposal, it's under the, I don't know if it's under the Flood Hazard Area Act or not, but the Flood Hazard Area Act has the riparian zones for the C1 streams. And there's a map that lists where the C1 streams are. And this is expanding the C1 streams,
And who's making that determination, Paul?
the DEP.
DEP.
Okay.
And-
It's probably a rulemaking proposal.
It's proposed
New Jersey
rulemaking.
DEP.
Yeah.
So this is being floated out as a proposal, and DEP will entertain comments. And I'm not actually sure when comments are due. I have to double check the
People
rulemaking.
that nobody voted for, right?
Yes.
The rhetorical.
And another thing to keep your eye out for is in Morris County, they published a map where the DEP is going to be studying more streams for floodplains. There's good and bad to that. The disheartening part of that is there are a significant number of streams where they're going to be delineating the floodplains by an approximate method and not by a detailed study. The DEP approximate method grossly overstates the floodplains, grossly. And it can create real problems. So I haven't seen that proposed yet for Morris County, for Sussex County, but it is in Morris County.
If you go to the, I can forward this around to Trina, and Trina can forward it. This is the DEP press release. DEP proposes reclassifying 749 miles of waterways to Category 1 status for significant upgrade in more than a decade. That is the press release, and there's a link there to the proposed rules, and I believe the map is identified as well.
Is there a new Murphy director that might be responsible for this?
Look, this has been up and down expansion of the Category 1 waters for years. Hell, it was proposed, even under Christie, there was discussion about expanding it, and then it never happened. Under this administration, it's going to be full speed ahead.
Yeah, and generally speaking, when a rule proposal is made by a department, there is the periods to comment. Comments are received, comments are then grouped together and responded to, and the general response is, we heard you, but we're adopting.
You mean the fix is in?
Here's the law. So the real proposal is usually what becomes law. Not that it couldn't be changed, but it's not.
But there are often tweaks to it.
Yeah.
And
mapping.
And the mapping may change. They may take streams out based upon, if there's an indication that it is not a true Category 1 quality, there can be change to it. And I believe they're having there's going to be some presentations on it.
When there's stuff like this, isn't it?
It's another rhetorical question.
No, this is a legitimate question.
Okay.
When they do stuff like this, isn't this tantamount to a condemnation?
To the simple mind, you would think yes. To the complex legal thinkers of the Supreme Courts of New Jersey and the United States, not taking unless you have no reasonable use whatsoever of any part of the land that you own.
No reasonable use.
Of any part.
And under the regulations,
There's that word again, reasonable, that's intended to be ambiguous.
So if you have 100 acres, 99 of it is prohibited, but 1 acre could be built upon for one house.
but it goes further
Even the
than
most
that.
conservative Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that that's adequate compliance with the.
And the regulations say forestry management is a reasonable use of the land.
It's not what I bought it for, but
So any tree.
forestry management is a usable.
Those are the cases.
It's not why I paid the price I paid for it, but
Well,
it's a
then
reasonable
you got to
use.
go over and talk to Gracie and Harrigan and file a land management plan and all that fun stuff.
But that's also why, like some acts, like the Highlands Act, give an exemption, they give 18 exemptions, but one of them is for one single-family house on any lot existing at the time of the
the Act of 2000.
If you're building it for yourself or a family member.
Right, if you're building, if it's new,
I love the caveat.
well, but the other one, there's another one for that, and it's just a smaller exemption. So, they get you coming and they get you going, and if you win the challenge to the validity of the Highlands Act and the confiscation, they get to grant you a hardship waiver.
Bless you.
After you've won the lawsuit. So no one has done that for you.
Imagine that.
Okay, there's more.
More good news?
More good news.
Got a letter from Office of Planning Advocacy talking about our municipality's center designation. I believe Frank and Tom are already on this. Frank, if you just want to give a quick indication of center designation and plan endorsement.
Those are both aspects of the state plan that Bedminster applied for and lobbied for and ultimately secured, so that we have an endorsed plan and we have two centers that were designated, a town center at Pluckerman and a village center in Bedminster.
Interestingly enough, just to tie back, because we have a center designation, that actually gives us a little more leeway on some of the Category 1 other issues.
Yeah, and it was supposed to also provide some additional assistance in qualifying for grants or getting technical assistance from the states or other things like that that you might want to do in the center or in town that had an endorsed plan. The State Planning Commission had expiration dates on these things, and we've been advised that unless we extend the centers and plan endorsement that we received, it will expire. And having gone through the process of securing it at significant time and expense, we want to make sure that we continue to get whatever benefits might come from it. There's really no downside to those designations. So that's what we're following up on now.
Okay, so this is in your hands, and you guys are going to do whatever you need to do to maintain the status.
But I very appreciate that, but just so you understand, you're one of the few municipalities in New Jersey that the whole master plan received endorsement by the State Planning Commission. And as part of that, one of the few, but more, there are some more, who received center designation of two centers, Pluckerman and Bedminster. And as I've said to you before, I think it's worth keeping those and maintaining those. In fact, I don't even think as a planner or practical person that centers that exist like yours actually ever go away. I don't,
Yeah.
this whole idea that it somehow evaporates bureaucratically makes no sense, but come see our centers. And you can come personally or you can do an aerial, you'll see that we have two centers. So the reason it's important to stay in this process is, and it may require some tinkering and some work and some efforts to demonstrate why you deserve endorsement again, but it all interrelates with goals of the state plan, which were sort of ignored by the last administration, but which are actually an adopted state plan, which basically says state agencies should do things that are generally consistent with this state plan. All right? It's not top-down, it doesn't make you do anything, but it encourages state agencies, at a minimum in the state, to do things that are consistent with the goals and purposes of that state plan. And your master plan is 100% endorsed by the state plan. Your master plan is basically integrated into the state plan, and as a result of it, I'll toot Frank's horn on this a little bit, is he convinced them that, you know, normally you put farms into 4A of the state plan, planning area 4A, but your farming areas are also very environmentally sensitive, and part of the reason why you won the Kirby lawsuit was that you're in your planning area of the most pristine, environmentally sensitive areas of the state, in true reality. And so
the map, yours is different. Map has you at 5, all green in the R10. Doesn't have that surrounding you. And they observe that you also do allow horse farming, and you do allow farming, and you do allow it in an environmentally sensitive manner, and you promote it. So they recognize that. So hopefully they'll continue to recognize that. If they do, they could actually give you grants. Does the state really give much money out to anyone? The answer is no. The rhetorical answer is no. No. Do they have any money? No. And so they have all your money. But from a planning perspective, it's actually great stuff. Okay, so if you can keep going with it, keep staying without being costing too much, it's definitely worth it. Also, by the way, does help in defending Mount Laurel litigation, which theoretically was in Mount Laurel 2 based upon, guess what? The growth areas of the state plan. That wasn't followed by COA in the last round. It isn't being followed by the Supreme Court or by the courts now. It's a mess, but luckily you're safe and you have a declaratory judgment. And to some extent, that helped because the vacant land in the planning areas 1, 2, and the centers was used in the formulas by both Kinsey, Dr. Kinsey, and by eConsult. And your vacant land is just the vacant land in the centers, which is near zero.
Right. Actually, just looking at some of the notes in the DEP proposed rules, they said that they identify the village and centers that are impacted by the expansion of Category 1 waters, that identifies Bedminster not as a center but as a village, and said that DEP then concludes that based upon where they've applied and designated the C1 waters, it would have no impact on housing potential in Bedminster. So therefore, they've reached the conclusion that your center designation, but this doesn't affect your ability to provide housing. Lou, you asked about if there was details about where it was, and there's a map, but let me just, it actually designates it here in the regs, or the proposed regs. Lamington River, so it starts up in Mine Hill, Roxbury, down Chester, Lamington River, Black River, Pottersville, the confluence with Reinhardt Brook to Camp Brady, including all tributaries, and then moving downstream, Camp Brady Bridge to confluence with Cold Brook, including all UN unnamed tributaries, and then it goes even further, Lamington River, Old Wick, confluence with Cold Brook to Route 523 Bridge, including all tributaries, and 523 Bridge to River Road West, including all tributaries. So that's the reach of the Lamington, and for the Raritan River, for the North Branch, tributary southeast of Bedminster, entire length except the northeast tributary. Now, there's a map that provides, it gives you a little color, but for your area, yes.
Yes.
So it's the Lamington River or the Black River, depending upon where you're standing, and all those tributaries running into it. So just as Paul said,
North Branch,
so the streams that run down the hill come into the Black River, buffers lie there as well.
300 feet on both
300
sides.
feet on either side of
The
those,
top of bank, is it, Paul?
Top of bank.
Top of bank, so.
We have,
So if
we
it's
have
down,
a river
it's-
on both sides of
The
South
wide one,
Drive.
it's even wider.
There's a little creek
On
behind
the center.
us.
Right. That's
And then-
Herzog Brook.
Huh?
That's been C1 for a while.
The
That's
one
been
that
C1?
runs,
Herzog Brook has been C1.
Okay.
the ones that run next to Purnell School and
Yeah.
the farm there, that's C1, and then we have the Black River on the other side, or the Lamington River, off the street.
Tell you, Lou, I
It's
asked
getting
one.
squeezed between the two
You
rivers.
can come back to Steeplechase.
Yeah.
If he builds an ark, maybe he'll get an exemption.
Okay, there's more. So Highlands grants. Got a letter from Highlands saying that the 2019 round of funding consideration is open with an application deadline of Tuesday, April 30. Frank, I'm not sure if you saw a copy of this, or Tom, here if you want it. And also, we got a copy of the Reddington Master Plan Reexamination Report prepared by Clark Caton Hintz. So if anyone wants to see Reddington, it's a requirement that you send it to your adjacent towns. So the Master Plan Reexamination Report is here. I will leave that with Trina in case anyone's interested. I don't think if there's anything else from Township Committee side that, you can have that.
No.
You can have that. No, so those are my comments.
Okay.
No more letters from residents of Bridgewater to tell us about?
No. And I didn't see any, no one came up to make, about that project? Never mind.
No. You want to talk about JCP&L? Do you want to say?
Oh, yes, I did. Thank you very much. Oh, my goodness. So, after the recent power outages, and actually during the recent power outages, I was texting constantly with our JCP&L rep to see where we stood, especially this last storm. And I made a very strong suggestion that our JCP&L rep, who's already appeared before us when back in January, and he's been very good in communication with us about where they stand, how many crews they have, and what's going on. But I suggested that we wanted him here at the next Township Committee meeting, and not just as the municipal liaison, but we wanted him to bring someone from engineering to talk about what is happening, and more importantly, what is JCP&L doing to harden the system. So March 18th, if you could let your friends and family know, and for those in the associations, please distribute that. So March 18th, we will have our JCP&L rep and someone from engineering to entertain, well, first a presentation about what has happened, right? As some of these are just accidents, right? The tree knocks down something, right? But then there's the issue about what are they doing in addition to the tree trimming? Are they expanding the tree trimming? And is there anything else they can do on the maintenance of the existing infrastructure to harden it? So that's what I've lined up for March 18th, and hope to see lots of you there. Now I'm done.
You sure?
But now it's Collins, sir.
No, I have no comments.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, then we will have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
That's the only motion tonight.
So what did happen with
Could the master plan subcommittee, anybody on this master plan subcommittee, if you
What, I'm
Sunday
sorry,
night,
what?
if there's anybody on the master plan subcommittee, if we could
Yes.
talk, Frank and I could talk with you a little bit.
Okay.
That'd be, Frank thinks that
Yeah,
might be a
okay.
good idea.